It's 10:17 at night. The TV is still humming in the background. There are a couple of dishes sitting in the sink that you'll get to eventually. Your phone is in your hand, glowing against the dark room as you scroll through one more text, one more headline, one more thing that somehow feels urgent. Then you feel it. Not a bark, not the sound of nails tapping across the floor, not a wet nose nudging your arm. Just a look. Your dog is sitting across the room, watching you. Maybe they've been there for 30 seconds, maybe 10 minutes. You honestly don't know. And that's the strange part. Without making a sound, without asking for anything obvious, they've managed to pull your attention away from everything else. If you've lived with a dog for any length of time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You glance up and catch them staring. Not intensely, not dramatically, just quietly. Patiently, like they've been waiting. The funny thing is, nothing appears to be wrong. Their water bowl is full. Dinner happened hours ago. That favorite squeaky toy, the one that's missing half its stuffing but somehow remains their treasure, is lying right beside them. The leash is hanging exactly where it always hangs. Yet they're still looking at you. And looking. I think most dog lovers have experienced a moment like this. A moment that feels oddly difficult to explain. Because sometimes it doesn't feel like your dog is looking at you. It feels like they're looking through all the noise around you. Past the phone, past the television, past whatever is occupying your mind. And somehow, they're waiting for the version of you that's underneath all of it. That's where this story begins. For a long time, researchers assumed moments like these were mostly practical. Dogs were seeking food, safety, attention, routine. And sure, sometimes that's true. Sometimes a stare means dinner is late. Sometimes it means the walk is overdue. Sometimes it means they're hoping you'll accidentally drop a piece of chicken. Dogs are still dogs, after all. But here's the thing. Every devoted dog owner has experienced the stare that comes after all the needs have already been met. After the meal, after the walk, after the belly rub, after the day has settled into silence. And that's when the question becomes harder to answer. What are they waiting for? Why are they still watching? Why does it feel as though something important is being communicated without a single word? I know how that sounds. A little mysterious, maybe even a little sentimental. But stay with me, because I don't think it's as complicated as we often make it. Dogs aren't just students of our routines, they're students of us. They notice the sigh you let out when you finally sit down at the end of a long day. They notice the way your voice changes after a difficult phone call. They notice when your footsteps are lighter. And when they're heavier, they notice when you're laughing. They notice when you're worried. They notice when you're physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. While we're busy managing schedules, deadlines, grocery lists, appointments, and everything else life throws at us, our dogs are paying attention to something completely different: connection. That's what they're tracking, not the calendar, not the clock. Connection. Maybe that's why those quiet stares hit us so deeply. Because somewhere inside, we recognize that they mean something, not something practical, something emotional. It feels almost like a question, a silent one, a question that never arrives in language. And maybe the saddest part is this. Many loving dog owners think they already know the answer. They assume their dog wants another treat, another toy, another activity, so they immediately reach for something, something to give, something to offer, something to fix, because that's how humans often show love. We provide, we solve, we improve, we work harder. But what if your dog is waiting for something money can't buy? What if they're not hoping for another experience at all? What if they're waiting for a feeling? Think about that for a second. Not a thing, a feeling. A feeling that's become surprisingly rare in a world filled with notifications, distractions, deadlines, and endless scrolling. A feeling that says, I'm here, right now, with you. Not checking my phone every 30 seconds. Not mentally replaying yesterday. Not already worrying about tomorrow morning. Just here, for this moment, with you. And if you're listening to this while folding laundry, driving home from work, or walking your own dog down a familiar sidewalk, I want you to hear something. You're probably already a good dog owner. In fact, you may care more than you realize. You worry about your dog. You think about their happiness. You wonder if they're getting enough exercise, enough enrichment, enough attention, enough time. You ask yourself questions that indifferent people never ask. Am I doing enough? Am I missing something? Could I be better? Those questions don't come from neglect. They come from love. Yet the people who love their dogs most often carry the heaviest guilt. The guilt of being tired. The guilt of being distracted. The guilt of working late. The guilt of saying just a minute when that minute turns into 20. The guilt of feeling like there is never enough time. And if that's you, I want to gently offer another possibility. Maybe your dog isn't sitting across the room because you failed them. Maybe they're sitting there because they still believe in you. Maybe they believe that eventually you'll look up. Maybe they trust that sooner or later your eyes will meet theirs. And for a few seconds, the rest of the world will disappear. Maybe that stare isn't a request at all. Maybe it's an invitation. An invitation into something so simple most people miss it. And before this conversation is over, you might discover that the thing your dog has been waiting for all along isn't another act of love. It's the feeling of being seen, truly seen, by the person they love most. The misunderstanding starts because humans like measurable things. We count steps. We count calories. We count hours. So naturally, we count love. The number of walks, the quality of the food, the orthopedic bed in the corner, the toy basket overflowing with tennis balls, ropes, and chewed up stuffed animals. And don't get me wrong, those things matter. Of course they do. They keep dogs healthy, safe, comfortable. But hidden inside that way of thinking is a belief that quietly fools a lot of us. We start assuming that care and connection are the same thing. They're not. Not always. You've probably met a dog who has everything. the best food, the best veterinarian, the best accessories. Yet somehow there's still a subtle distance. Nothing dramatic, just a feeling, a softness that's missing, a spark that isn't quite what it used to be. Maybe you've even felt it with your own dog. They still follow you around the house. They still greet you at the door, but something feels different. Hard to define, harder to admit. And because you care so much, you immediately turn the blame inward. Maybe I should have spent more time with her. Maybe I should have trained him better. Maybe I should have done more. That's where so many loving owners get stuck. Not because they're failing, because they're trying. The people who worry most are usually the people carrying the biggest hearts. They're the ones who keep emergency numbers saved in their phones. The ones who remember medication schedules better than their own appointments. The ones who rearrange vacation plans because leaving their dog feels harder than leaving anyone else. And still, they wonder if it's enough. But connection isn't built the same way care is built. Care keeps a dog alive. Connection makes a relationship feel alive. There's a difference. A subtle one, but an important one. A dog appreciates what you do for them. What they never forget is how they feel around you. That's the part many people miss. Feelings don't come in packages. They don't arrive through online orders. They can't be replaced by another toy or another treat. The deepest bonds are usually built in moments that look completely ordinary from the outside. A glance across a room. The sound of your voice saying their name. The way they lean against your leg while you're making coffee. A quiet pause before bed. Tiny moments, that's where relationships live. And the more scientists study dogs, the more fascinating this becomes. For decades, researchers tried to understand how dogs interpret the humans around them. What they found was humbling. Dogs are paying attention constantly. Not just to what we do, to who we are. They notice patterns most people overlook. The rhythm of your footsteps, the way you breathe when you're stressed, the slight change in your voice when you're trying to sound okay, but you're not. They notice all of it, long before most humans do. Many owners assume dogs primarily understand words. And yes, they understand some, but words are only part of the story. Dogs are listening to tone, body language, facial expressions, energy, emotion, all at once. Sometimes it seems like they're listening to the truth underneath the words. And maybe that's why they react differently to the exact same sentence spoken in two different moods. The words haven't changed. You have. And somehow they know. Think about the days you came home exhausted but tried to hide it. The days you smiled because you felt like you should. The days you told everyone you were fine. Your dog probably wasn't fooled. Not because they understood your circumstances, because they understood you. A slower movement, a longer silence, a heavier sigh. Small things, tiny things. The kinds of things most people miss. Dogs don't. And sometimes, if we're honest, it almost feels a little mysterious. Like they're seeing a version of us we can't fully see ourselves. Maybe that's why so many people say their dog understood them better than most humans ever did. Not because dogs read minds, they don't. They read moments, thousands of them, every single day. And over time, those moments become a language all their own. There's a story I heard years ago that I've never quite forgotten. A woman in her 60s had just lost her sister. Not suddenly. It came after a long illness. The kind that gives you time to prepare. But somehow, never enough time to truly prepare. For decades, the two of them had talked almost every day. Morning calls, quick check-ins, little conversations about nothing and everything. Then one day, the calls stopped. The house felt different, quieter. She told everyone she was doing okay. Friends checked on her. Family called. I'm fine. But she wasn't. And somewhere inside, she knew it. What makes the story remarkable isn't what happened next. It's who noticed. Her dog had never been particularly clingy. Sweet, yes. Loving, yes. But independent, the kind of dog who preferred her own favorite corner of the house. The kind who liked affection on her terms. Then something shifted. For nearly 2 weeks, she barely left her owner's side. If the woman sat on the couch, the dog settled nearby. If she walked into another room, the dog quietly followed. If she woke in the middle of the night, there was a familiar shape waiting outside the bedroom door. No commands. No training exercises. No obvious reason. Just presence. Steady. Quiet. Unwavering. Months later, the woman said something that stayed with me. She said, I don't think she understood what happened to my sister. But I think she understood what happened to me. And honestly, I think a lot of dog owners know exactly what she meant. Because stories like this are everywhere. The dog who becomes unusually affectionate during a divorce. The dog who refuses to leave someone's side after surgery. The dog who somehow senses grief before a single tear falls. We hear these stories so often that they almost sound ordinary. But when you stop and think about them, they're extraordinary. Science has started exploring this mystery too. In 2016, researchers at the University of Lincoln discovered something fascinating. Dogs were able to combine information from human facial expressions and vocal tones. In simple terms, they could recognize when the emotion they were hearing matched the emotion they were seeing. Think about that. They weren't just reacting to a smile. They weren't just reacting to a voice. They were putting the pieces together. A face, a tone, a feeling, and creating a fuller picture of the human standing in front of them. That's remarkable. Because it suggests something deeper than simple observation. Dogs may not understand every detail of our lives, but they seem incredibly skilled at understanding our emotional state. Maybe that's why those quiet stares matter so much. Maybe that's why a dog sitting silently across the room can feel so different from simple curiosity. Sometimes that look isn't asking a question. Sometimes it's answering one. It's as if they're saying, I know you're carrying something today. And maybe that's why the memory of those moments stays with us, years later, long after they happen. Because being understood is one of the rarest experiences in life, especially when no words are involved. Which brings me to a question I find myself thinking about more often these days. If your dog could speak for exactly 1 minute, what would they say? Not forever, not every day, just 60 seconds. One conversation, one chance. Most people imagine practical requests. More treats, longer walks, a bigger backyard, maybe even fewer trips to the veterinarian. And honestly, who could blame them? But the longer I sit with that question, the less convincing those answers feel. Because when people look back on the relationship they shared with a beloved dog, the memories that matter most are rarely about possessions. They're about moments. The quiet morning when the house was still asleep. The difficult season when the dog never left their side. The evening walk taken after a terrible day. The familiar weight of a head resting on a knee. Those are the memories people carry, not the toys, not the purchases, not the things. And here's the thing. If dogs could speak, I don't think their most important message would be complicated. I don't think it would sound profound. I think it might sound something like this. Stay with me while you're here. That's it. Simple. Almost painfully simple. Stay with me while you're here. Because dogs seem to understand something humans spend decades trying to learn. Attention is one of the purest forms of love. When your dog curls up beside you while you're reading, they aren't judging the quality of the furniture. When they follow you from room to room, they're not conducting surveillance. When they wait outside the bathroom door, and every dog owner knows exactly what I'm talking about, they're choosing proximity. They're choosing you over and over again. Not because you're perfect. Not because you never make mistakes. Not because you've figured life out. Because you're theirs. And somehow, that's enough. There's a kind of wisdom in that. A quiet wisdom. Dogs don't seem nearly as impressed by accomplishments as humans are. They care about presence, moments, time spent together. And moments are strange things. You can't save them for later. You can't store them away. You can only live them while they're happening. Unfortunately, most people don't fully understand that until they're looking backward. After the leash has been hung up for the last time. After the water bowl has been put away. After the familiar sound of paws on hardwood floors becomes a memory instead of a daily occurrence. Talk to people who've lost a dog they loved deeply. You'll notice something. The regrets sound surprisingly similar. Almost never. I wish I'd bought more toys. Almost never. I wish I'd spent more money. Instead, you hear things like, I wish I'd slowed down. I wish I'd noticed sooner. I wish I'd spent one more evening sitting with her. Those are the regrets that linger. Because in the end, time becomes precious in a way possessions never can, especially as we get older. You begin to understand how quickly life moves. One day, your dog is sprinting through the house with the reckless confidence of youth. Then one morning, you notice a little gray around the muzzle, a slower rise after a nap, a heavier sigh when they lie down. And maybe you stop for a second. Because it feels like it happened overnight. But it didn't. It happened gradually, quietly. one ordinary day at a time. Life rarely announces change. It whispers. That's why so many people miss it. One day you realize you'd give anything for another ordinary Tuesday. Another walk around the block. Another muddy paw print by the door. Another evening with that familiar face watching you from across the room. Funny, isn't it? The moments we almost overlook often become the moments we miss most. And if this conversation is touching something tender inside you right now, I want to tell you something. Please hear it. You are not alone. So many loving dog owners carry guilt, even years later. They replay memories, second-guess decisions, revisit mistakes. They search for evidence that they somehow failed. But guilt is a terrible historian. It remembers every flaw, every distraction, every bad day, and conveniently forgets the thousands of acts of love that came in between. Your dog didn't experience your relationship through the lens of your guilt. Your dog experienced something else. The sound of your car pulling into the driveway, the comfort of your voice, the routine of everyday life together, the safety of knowing you would come home again and again and again. That's the story they lived, not the one guilt tells. And maybe the most healing truth of all is this: dogs don't seem particularly interested in keeping score. They don't spend years replaying your mistakes. They don't build emotional courtrooms inside their heads. They don't gather evidence. They don't create verdicts. They wake up. They stretch. They look for you. And they choose the relationship again every single day. Think about that. After difficult days, after misunderstandings, after moments when life pulled your attention elsewhere, they begin again. There's something deeply beautiful about that. Maybe even something spiritual. Because humans often spend years trying to earn love. Dogs spend their lives offering it. Not blindly, not foolishly, but generously. And maybe that's the lesson they've been teaching us all along. Connection doesn't require perfection. It never did. Maybe that's why it can begin right now. Not next month. Not after life becomes less busy. Not after you've fixed everything you're worried about. Right now. This evening. The next time your dog glances in your direction, the next time you hear those familiar paws crossing the floor, the next time they settle beside you without asking for anything. You don't need a grand gesture. You don't need a complicated plan. You don't need to become a different person. Just notice. That's where connection begins. So tonight, when things finally quiet down, try something simple. Not a training exercise. Not a challenge. Not another task. Just a few minutes. Sit down near your dog. Put the phone aside. Let the silence stay silent. Maybe they'll move closer. Maybe they'll rest their head against your leg. Maybe they'll simply stay where they are, watching, waiting, present. Whatever happens, let it be enough. Because sometimes the deepest connections happen when nothing remarkable is taking place. No performance, no achievement, no agenda, just two companions sharing the same moment. We spend so much of our lives preparing for what's next. The next responsibility, the next deadline, the next stage of life. Dogs don't seem particularly interested in any of that. They keep returning to now, again and again. And maybe that's why being around them can feel strangely healing. Not because they solve our problems, because they remind us where life is actually happening. Right here, right now. Maybe that's what that quiet stare was saying all along. Not give me more, not do better, not become someone else. Just this: I'm here. Are you here too? Because there's a difference between sharing a house and sharing a moment. One happens automatically, the other happens intentionally. And that's where the bond lives. That's where love lives. Not in extraordinary events, but in ordinary moments, repeated thousands of times. A glance, a routine, a familiar presence nearby, the sound of breathing in a quiet room, the soft thump of a tail against the floor, the way they look up when you say their name. Small things. Until one day you realize they were never small at all. So if your dog is somewhere nearby tonight, maybe pause before moving on to the next thing. Look at them. Not quickly. Not absent-mindedly. Really look. Meet their eyes. Let them know you're there. Because the connection you've been searching for might not require more effort. It might only require more presence. And now let's go back to where this began. It's 10:17 at night. The TV is still on. The dishes are still waiting in the sink. Your phone is still asking for your attention. And across the room sits your dog. Quiet. Patient. Watching. The difference now is that you see the moment differently. That stare may never have been a request. Maybe it was an invitation. One that's been waiting for you all along. And next time, we're going to explore another mystery that dog lovers have wondered about for years. Why some dogs seem to choose one person as their emotional home, even when they love everyone in the family. Because the answer reveals something extraordinary about the bond they've been building with us for thousands of years.